Good afternoon. It is my honor to announce our third lecture for today within the International Women's Day at EHS event, and that is a lecture of Dr. Adriana Bara with the title The Role of Women in the Romanian Orthodox Church Society and Diaspora. The whole event is organized by Enskilda Högskolan Stockholm, Studieförbunden Bilda, and the Swedish Ecumenical Women's Council. Before presenting our lecture today, I would just like shortly to give you some practical information, and that is that you can ask questions after the lecture is over by posting them in the chat. And then I will moderate the question and answer series and Adriana will reply to them. But now it is my big honor to present you Dr. Adriana Bara, who is a senior lecturer at Eastern Christian Studies, St. Ignatius College, Stockholm School of Theology, who is specialized in Orthodox theology, iconology, and iconography. Adriana received her bachelor in theology as well as her bachelor in civil engineering in Romania, and then she received her Master of Theology from Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. And after that, she did her PhD in theology at University of Montreal. She taught at University of Concordia in Montreal, and since this year, she's part of our team at Enskilda Högskolan Stockholm. Since 2013, she has been the executive director of the Canadian Centre for Ecumenism, where she dealt with many interesting and important projects, and among other things, she represented Eastern Christianity in international and intergovernmental organizations that has its goal the promotion of the peace through dialogue. Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bojana. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the Department of Eastern Christian Study at the International Women's Day. I am honored. And at the same time, I have the chance to speak about Romanian women, because to my knowledge, the Romanian woman was never a subject of an academic work or presentation. So I'm very pleased that I have this opportunity. The title of my presentation today is The Role of Women in the Romanian Orthodox Church Society and Diaspora, as Bojana announced it. So please let me share with you my screen because I prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I hope you see the screen.
Yes.
Okay. I will begin with the first part, the role of women in the Romanian Orthodox Church. If one asks a Romanian woman how Romanians became Christians, she would say that Romanians were Christianized by the Apostle Andrew, the first called among the apostles. Among the apostles, they learned from their mothers. Grandmothers, and great-grandmothers that Romanians inherited and transmitted from one generation to another the apostolic faith. The apostle preached and converted to Christianity the Daco-Romans in Scythia Minor, part of which is in today's Dobroja in southeast of Romania. According to a group of Romanian scholars, the idea of early Christianization is unsustainable. They argue that the history of Christianity in Romania began with the Roman province of Lower Moesia, where many Christians were martyred at the end of the 3rd century, so we cannot go farther than 3rd century. Yet another group of scholars hold the apostolic roots of Romanian Christianity. The latest group came with sources, and among them, one is biblical in Colossians 3:11, and I cite, there is neither Greek nor Jews, circumcision or uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythians, bound or free, but Christ is all and in all. When Romanians read this citation, they believe that Sicilians refers to the Dobroja's habitants. Origen, the 2nd century theologian, wrote in his letter to Hippolytus that Saint Andrew preached to the Scythians. And again, Romanians scholars who want to prove the apostolic roots of Romanian Christianity, they give this as a source. And finally, Eusebius of Caesarea, the 4th century ecclesiastical historian, mentioned that Bishop Tomi of Scythia participated at the First Ecumenical Council in Nicaea in 325. And Tomi is a name that is also of a town in Dobroja, and they thought that this bishop has this name because he lived in Tomis in Scythia, which is in Dobroja. Now, Romanian women are not necessarily interested in the academic justification from one side or the other. They keep the tradition that Saint Andrew put his foot on Romanian land. Romanians in general and women in particular visit the monastery built next to the cave where, according to tradition, Saint Andrew lived. And I included here in my presentation, this slide, a picture of the cave where tradition holds that Saint Andrew lived when he visited Dobroja. They drink from the spring water, which according to tradition is an Andrew's spring. And women also bring the sick member of their families to the monastery and pray together with the monks for the healing of their dear ones. And here we have, on this slide, we have also the Romanian church, the church of this monastery, Saint Andrew Monastery, and is a place where women bring people who are before they die because they don't have any chances from a medical point of view. So it's a very touching place to visit. And they pray unceasingly until that person dies or is healed. And I included also in my slide an icon that represents Saint Andrew in front of the cave and how he preaches to Romanians. We recognize the Romanians by their traditional habit costumes. Now, Saint Andrew is the patron of Romania and of the Romanian Orthodox Church. Implicitly, many mothers pray to Saint Andrew to intercede to God to protect their sons and daughters. No wonder that the most common names in Romania is Andrei for boys and Andrea for girls. I said mother pray because in the Romanian Orthodox Church, women are more faithful than men. The churches are filled by women every Sunday and every feast of the liturgical year. I don't want to say that there are not men in Romanian churches, but the number of women is way greater than men's. Women are the ones who take care of the churches, embellish them with flowers, because they understand the church as the place where God dwells. They know that the Holy Spirit descends during the epiclesis in the liturgy. Epiclesis is the prayer for the invocation of the Holy Spirit to descend over the bread and wine and transform them into the body and blood of Christ. And they arrange the church for the Holy Spirit who descends. The nicest monastic churches in Romania are those where none lives. The monks' monasteries are also beautiful, but nuns have an unequaled inclination towards beauty and art, which is reflected in their monasteries. Many of them are UNESCO patrimony. And I want to show you several monastic churches from Bukovina, is in northeastern part of Romania, built in 16th century, which are UNESCO patrimony, and which are in the hand of the nuns, in the careful hands of nuns. First of them is Humor Monastery. I included this picture of the church. It's not the entire monastery. The monastic complex is large, but I included only the church because these churches are unique in the world. As you may probably know, the Orthodox churches are painted on the inner walls of the church, but these churches have frescoes also on the outer walls. And one of them is at Humor Monastery. Another monastic church is Probota, also in the hands of nuns since it was founded. And the exterior frescoes are not very well preserved, but the interior frescoes are very, very well preserved. What happened in 19th century, the frescoes, the internal frescoes were covered by an overpaint, 19th century overpaint. And the nuns spoke with the Minister of Culture, and they also intermediate with some Japanese companies who paid for the art restorers to erase the 19th century overpaint. And when one enters into Probota's church, monastic church, the frescoes are like painted 1 month ago, so are very well preserved. Now, in these churches, we have unique depictions. It's not the theme of my presentation, but I cannot not to present at least one or two in each church. And in Probota, if you visit this church, the nuns for sure, they will show you in the altar the depiction of the Holy Communion. And we have here depicted the fathers, great theologians, and Saint John Chrysostom is with a knife in his hand, and Christ is with his arms and legs severed, and there are placed on the discos. What the iconographer wants to emphasize here is that the Eucharist is really the body. In the Eucharistic cup, there is really the body and blood of Christ. So they want to make believers aware that is not anything that they eat, but instead that they unite themselves with Christ through the Eucharist. Another monastic church is the Church of Moldovitza Monastery. Here is very interesting. On the outer wall, they have the depiction of the liberation of Constantinople from the Muslim conqueror, from the Ottoman conqueror. Moldavians wanted very much to preserve the Byzantine tradition, and they saw themselves as the future liberators of Constantinople. This fresco is part of a larger program of frescoes, but is unique in Moldavian art, so I just want to show it to you. And there are many nuns that are praying while the Moldavians free Constantinople. Another very famous church, and all these churches, as I said, are in the hands of nuns since they were built. Another very famous monastic church is Waronet Monastery. And from the Waronet Monastery, I want to show you only the Last Judgment, the fresco of Last Judgment that is on the outer wall. And is also known as the Chapel Sistine of the East because of its unique depiction of the Last Judgment. Finally, another church that I want to show you is the Church of Waronet Monastery. Probably this is the most famous. It is said that for the ransom of her husband's sin, a woman brought with her buffalo-drawn cart for 30 is the stone necessary for the church. 30 nuns habit now the monastery. It's a beautiful the monastery church, monastic church, and the frescoes are just breathtaking. I present to you one of them, the letter of Saint Scholasticus. Is a depiction of the ladder extending from the earth to heaven, conform to Genesis 28:12. Several monks are depicted climbing the ladder. At the top is Jesus Christ, prepared to receive them into heaven. Also shown are angels helping the climbers, and demons attempting to shoot with arrows or drag down the climbers, no matter how high up they are on the ladder. Another very interesting fresco at Sucevița Monastery is the Tree of Jesse, the depiction of the ancestors of Christ shown in a tree, which races from Jesse's, the father of King David. And at the left and right side of King David and Jesse, we have the philosopher, the ancient philosopher, with open parchments on which are written extracts from their teaching about God. I remember 50 years ago during one of my visits for my PhD thesis to this monastery, that I have been very impressed by the thousands of pilgrims who came to celebrate the monastery's patron saint. The nuns feed all the crowd. They prepared fish and bread and a small glass of wine for everybody for free. I wonder if they multiplied the fish and bread, because it was unbelievable for me to see how 30 nuns were feeding thousands of pilgrims, and none left without physical and spiritual food. Now, nice churches and nice monasteries are not in the hand of nuns, not only in Bukovina, but also in other parts of Romania. And I choose Transylvania and precisely Maramureș. Maramureș is actually, Transylvania is one of the provinces in Romania, and Maramureș is in the northern Transylvania. And there are very special wood churches in Maramureș. Maramureș is renowned by the wood churches. And many of them are UNESCO patrimonies, and one of them is Bursana Monastery. Like the monasteries in Bukovina, the monasteries and churches in Maramureș are generally offered to God. In this picture, in the next picture, we can see the guests' room prepared by nuns for guests who wish to live for a while like people in Maramureș. So these are very traditional Transylvanian and Maramureșan rooms. In these Maramureș churches and in Transylvania in general, only nuns, virgins, or widowers can make the special bread used in the Eucharist. In other traditional churches, for instance, in the Armenian Apostolic Church or in the Greek Orthodox churches, the priest chooses a person from the community, or the priest himself prepares the bread for the Eucharist. But in the church in Maramureș, only women bring this offer to the altar. And this is a special bread. As you can see, it has a stamp on it. And this rectangle is taken out from the bread, and from this rectangle is used as bread in the Holy Eucharist. And the rest of the bread is shared with the entire community at the end of the liturgy. When we enter in these nice wooden churches, we can see that the iconography of the frescoes is very different from what we see in other Romanian Orthodox churches. Byzantine iconography is well preserved in Bukovina, Maramuresh, sorry. Many authors use the expression Byzantium after Byzantium when refers to the iconography, monastic and liturgical life preserved in Romania as a continuation of the glory of Byzantium. Yet the Byzantine iconography is combined with Transylvanian traditional art, and we can admire the unique Transylvanian iconography in these churches. Naive in depiction, the frescoes reflect this combination. Transylvanian women treasure this naive iconography and they transpose it on glass and make portable icons. Many women became very famous iconographers on glass, and I included in this slide some examples of icons painted on glass, different themes, as you can see, very colorful, and you can find these icons only in Transylvania. The Romanian laywomen, like nuns, have as model for their life the Mother of God and the myrrh-bearer woman. Romanian use for the Mother of God, a unique word, is Maica. It is a word that in Romanian means mother and virgin at the same time. It is the nicest word that one can address to a woman, and it is used when somebody addresses a nun or a mother when wishes to express infinite love and reverence to her. Indirectly, the word Maica expresses that a mother is an image of the prototype, Mary, the mother and virgin par excellence. I wish to mention here that Maica Siluana, I give only one example. Maica Siluana is one of the most loved nuns and women in Romania. She has such a powerful influence on Romanians as nobody else in the Romanian Orthodox Church, even clergy. The second model for Romanian women is the myrrh-bearer woman. They were discreet presence in serving Jesus Christ and the apostles, so they could spread the teaching of the gospel. And since the dawn of Christianity, women have played a privileged role in the relation to the central event of the incarnation, the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. They witnessed the crucifixion closely, participated in the burial, and were the first to talk to the angels announcing the news of the resurrection, the earliest attestation of Christ's return from the dead. The tired eye of a modern reader of the Bible can quickly slip over this detail. Still, I think it is extremely progressive, is an extremely progressive message. The paradigm of gender relation is completely overturned, and women acquire an unseen before status. There were no movements of emancipation at that time, as you know. I think that this new status women received is due to their unconditioned love for Christ. And Romanian women have as model of faith and love the myrrh-bearers' love and faith. Through her structure, women in general and implicitly Romanian women are sensitive to the divine and the world beyond our world. There is a special role that the women play in the Romanian Orthodox Church. They maintain the mystical connection between the living and those departed from this life. Women connect the two worlds. How? They are the ones who go to cemetery, cleanse it, refresh the earth, embellish the grave with flowers, straighten the crosses, and go to other graves, the neighbors of their dead. But above all, they prepare special meals to remember those departed at 3 days, 7, 9, 1 month, 6 months, 6 months, 1 year, and then yearly. These meals are shared with the poor. And here you can see a special cakes made of wheat called coliva. And coliva is always part of the alms. Women prepare these meals in the hope of helping the soul of the departed to rest in peace. They also pray together with the priest who blesses the offering for the mercy of God in forgiving the deceased sins. So I would emphasize again that they have a unique role of, women have the unique role of making a connection between living and death. In the title of my presentation, I mentioned that I will also present women's role in society. I can speak about women working in almost all domain, if not all domain as men, and how famous women shine in their field. But I decided not to present them today because I want to remain in the church context and the invaluable contribution that the Romanian women have brought to the Romanian Orthodox Church. Romania, as you may know, was under a totalitarian communist regime for more than 40 years. Churches and monasteries were closed. Some remained open for tourism, but no nuns or monks lived there. And for more than 40 years, Christians were persecuted, but there was an underground church. And this underground church was the family. The only place where one could learn about Christian faith in Romania was in families. Thanks to the grandmothers and mothers who kept and transmitted the faith to their children, the Romanian Orthodox Church still exists today. I wish to share some statistics showing the impact of the Romanian woman keeping and transmitting the Christian faith from one generation to the other. I want to emphasize also that the education in Romanian families is a primary job for women, so women take care more than men for children, because men, they have to work, they have other duties in the family, so education is a duty of women. So this is why I said that they transmitted faith. Now, if I may to read the statistics here, according to the 2011 census, approximately 98% of Romanians are affiliated with a religion. 80% are Christian Orthodox. There are over 60,400 Orthodox churches and more than 11,000 from belonging to other denominations. Practically in each village exists a church. There are over 400 monasteries filled with nuns and monks, and many are very young. I counted the Sunday liturgies, and the result is impressive. Over 1,800 liturgies are celebrated in Romania every week, which means over 100 liturgies per year. This is only if we count the Sunday liturgies. During the liturgical year, there are other major feasts celebrating saints or events from the life of Jesus Christ and Mother of God. If we count them, the number of liturgy per year is way higher. For these reasons, Romanians dare to call Romania a holy land. I want to emphasize again that the church exists today because of Romanian women unwavering faith who keep the church alive in family. The church could continue its life after the fall of communism thanks to them. Another place where one can see the significant impact that the Romanian women have had is looking at the Romanian Orthodox Church Synod. Now I choose to show only the bishops in Diaspora. so the leaders, bishops and metropolitans in diaspora. The majority of bishops are young. I mentioned here only, as I said, the bishops in diaspora. We can see in this slide that Romanian metropolitans, bishops, age, place, their age and the place where they study. So it's also the place where they serve as bishops and also where they study. And you can see that in Eastern Europe, Metropolitan Iosif, 51 years old, he received his PhD from San Serge. Bishop Siluan of Italy, 47 years old, received his PhD Saint Serge, Paris, so on and so forth. All of them under 15 years old, receiving PhDs from universities out of Romania, except two who have received their PhDs in Romania. What I want to emphasize here, and also I have to mention also that Metropolitan Seraphim of Germany and Central Europe, he's 70 years old, is the only old metropolitan or bishop in diaspora, but he was and still is the spiritual father of many of the other bishops. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that all the bishops grew up under the communist regime. They all should have been atheists. Instead, there are living examples of faith. They inherited the love for Christ and the Christian faith from their mothers and grandmothers. Communists succeed to kill many Christians, but they couldn't kill the faith of Romanians. Now, I will stop sharing my screen. Now, many students in Canada, where I have taught since 2009, ask me about woman priesthood in the Romanian Orthodox Church and how women feel being, in their opinion, discriminated. Romanian women in general don't aspire to the priesthood. It's not a preoccupation for them. Yet they aspire to be better valorized in the church. But this is also in their power because they grow up the future bishops, priests, and deacons, and they have only to whisper in the boys' ears that women should be better valorized and encouraged to use their gifts from the church benefit. I mentioned above that the Romanian women keep the faith and Christianity alive during more than 40 years of the totalitarian communist regime. One of the goals of the communists was to destroy the church. And how could they destroy it easier if not by killing its leaders? Thousands of priests, bishops, and monks were imprisoned and then killed. They died imprisoned with the name of Christ on their lips. It was a chance for women not to be priests at that time because they were protected against the communist outrage towards the church. There is another aspect of the Orthodox Church that you might know. The Orthodox Church is a sacramental church, and one of the sacraments is the sacrament of confession of sins. Priests hear confessions of very heavy sins that sometimes trouble them tremendously. They have to keep the secret of confession at the price of their life. During communism, priests who didn't divulge the confession were killed. The majority of priests accepted that instead of collaborating with Securitatea, which is the Romanian secret police, was the Romanian secret police during the communism. Women again were protected against these atrocities because they were not priests and they didn't present interest in communists' agenda of destroying the church. Women could teach their children in the intimacy of family to honor the so-called saints of the prisons. All the saints of the prisons learn about faith, about their faith from their mothers or their grandmothers who have unwavering faith and love for Christ and the church. I would like to finish this part of my presentation by emphasizing that communists subestimated and were not aware of the power of Romanian women's faith who keep the church alive in their families until the fall of communism. Finally, the third part of my presentation is related to the Romanian woman in diaspora. And again, I could speak at large about the achievement of many Romanian women in diaspora and how they keep alive Romanian identity, culture, and faith. But I want to mention only two instances that are related to faith. These examples are from Quebec in Canada, where I lived for the last 20 years. There is only one French province in Canada, and that is Quebec. There is another bilingual province, New Brunswick, and other 11 English-speaking provinces. Quebec is very different from the rest of Canada in all respects. A severe, but I don't want to criticize Quebec. I only want to say that a severe and almost irreconcilable separation exists between lay state and religion in this province for more than 60 years. There were drastic measurements during the Corona crisis in the last year. And the first was closing the worshiping places. Although, for instance, bars still function because they believe they were considered providing essential services. Not even the funerals, not even the funerals were approved, let alone other community gatherings. At the initiative of the Catholic bishops of Quebec and the Romanian Orthodox women, there was established an interreligious roundtable gathering together representatives of churches of different denominations, Jews, Muslims, and other religious leaders at the highest level. After many lobbying actions, the Quebec government entered in dialogue with this group. The government members were aware of the influence the religious leaders could have in their communities because faithful rather listened to the advice of their religious leaders than of their political leaders. So for this reason, they accepted to enter in dialogue with the round table. And after 60 years of ignorance that the religious group received from the government, the dialogue is now possible thanks to the work, among others, of a Romanian determined Orthodox woman. In the meeting that the table's representative had with the Prime Minister of Quebec, this woman told him that prayer is not a disease, as the Quebec politicians believe, but a fundamental right that any Quebec citizen should have. The last thing that I wish to mention is that another Romanian woman, in collaboration with Bishop Ioan Casian, the leader of the Bishop of the Romanian Orthodox Diocese of Canada, initiated the opening of an Institute for Eastern Orthodox Studies for future priests and people in Canadian society. The Institute received accreditation from the Dominican College University in Ottawa. I would call it a nice ecumenical collaboration. This Romanian woman developed the academic program with all the courses for 4 years of undergraduate studies and 2 years of the master programs. She also contacted Romanian professors worldwide, and 14 agreed to united force to start the institute. I wish to mention that such an institute doesn't exist in Canada. There are some mini programs or courses included in other programs in few Canadian universities, but there is no Institute of Orthodox Studies or Institute of Eastern Orthodox Studies per se in Canada. The ambition is that the Institute became from Canada what St. Vladimir Institute is for the United States of America, and and the School of Eastern Orthodox Studies in Sweden. The Institute waits for the benediction and acceptance of the Romanian Patriarchate. I want to finish my presentation by saying that although we don't know if the Institute will receive the benediction to function, the initiative remains and can be the seed for something remarkable, an Orthodox institute that prepares the future priests for the Orthodox Canadian diaspora. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Adriana. It was a very nice journey and I enjoyed it very much. And now I'm inviting all the participants to pose their questions or comments in the chat. So we can start with that. So we have our first question. So thanking you for a most interesting presentation. And the question is, can you describe the leadership of monasteries for nuns? How is the relation between female leadership and monasteries and male clergy?
They have a very nice relationship. The nuns actually are the bosses of the monastery, not the clergy. The clergy that are entitled to present the liturgy, to do the liturgy. Of course, if there are believers who come to the monasteries to confess, they go to the priest that is in charge with that specific monastery. But everything else is done by nuns. Now, also the nuns, they welcome people in the monastery, they feed them. And some people, and especially women, and I would say women who had problems with men that are abused or they have problems in their families, they prefer to go to nuns to confess. But of course, for the sacrament of confession, so that they can approach the Holy Communion, they receive that blessing from the priest. But the real confession is between women and nuns. And there are respectful in Romanian Orthodox Church, respectful, they are loved, they have a very powerful voice. I think they complement each other very well. And I want to tell you something else. Women are not accepted in the holy sanctuary in the churches, but these nuns enter the holy sanctuary. So they can, of course, with the blessing of the priest of that monastery who is in charge with the liturgies. But they receive acceptance to go. Actually, when I did my PhD, when I was to Probota Monastery, a nun said, "Oh, I'm so happy I can show you the frescoes, the unique frescoes that we have in the altar." So she opened the altar for me to show me the unique frescoes that they have there. So they have a good relationship, I would say. Of course, there are always exceptions, but I don't think that this characterizes the Orthodox Church.
Thank you. We have another couple of questions. So another question is, in what ways do the Church empower female leadership, education, and other participations? And what do young women think about women's role within the Church?
Well, in education, women have a very important role. I can say that in Romania, there is in curriculum, there is one topic, the church or the teaching of Christianity, and I would say 99% of the teachers are women in schools. I was a teacher in school also. before my long parcours after that. So in education, women have education, family, the voice of woman, very powerful. They participate, women are in all domain. I was trained, I have a bachelor in civil engineering. Everybody told me, oh, how do you go to study civil engineering to claim the buildings? And it's not a problem in any domain. A woman can, it can be involved. It's not a problem, it's their choice. This was because the theological university were not open during the communism for women. So after they opened it, after the fall of communism, I ran to study theology because it was in my heart since I know myself. Now, what young women think about the woman's role within the church? There are young women who love the church and they understand that their role is complementing the role of men. They don't aspire to priesthood, but as I said in my presentation, they would love to be more valued. And there are many examples that I can give what women can do in a church. But there are also women who looked what happened in other churches and they admire, some of them consider, oh, women in the Protestant churches, they are free. So they are freed from men's power. But it's not really a preoccupation, even for young women, because they receive the education in their families, and they grow up with this idea of loving church and loving the Christian faith. But of course, when they go in the Western world, they might want to be part of a church that is liberal from their point of view. So they might choose to go to another church, but the majority, they love their church and they stay within the church. Now, it's also, unfortunately, a decreasing number. Like in all churches around the world, we have in Romania this decreasing number of lay people. But after the fall of communism was such a impulse, and many young men and women, they went in monasteries. So this is why in monastery we still have very young people. But it's we can see now a decreasing in the number.
Thank you, Adriana. There is another question about Maica Siluana. So you briefly mentioned her influence. Can you tell us more about what does its influence consist of?
Well, when Maica Siluana speaks and tell us something, we all do what she says. So we just are in love with her because she takes care of people who are despised by everybody else. So in her monastery, nuns take care of children that are not loved by others or are left in hospitals or on the street. She takes care of sick people. She has a very powerful discourse. When she speaks, it's like she goes into your inner being. And I'm sorry to tell sometimes, and I'm sure that you had this experience, you go sometimes in churches and you can hear bad preaching, such a homily that doesn't tell you anything. So what she does, she makes the word of the Bible very pertinent to contemporary society. So in her discourse, the question of the modern world encounter the answer in the Bible. And I would say that young people, they just fill to maximum all the rooms where she gives a conference or something. Now she's always on Zoom meeting, especially with the young people, because they want to hear her. She's now quite old, and she encounter weaknesses, and she always asks for prayer from these young persons that listen to her. But she's very influenced in everything she says. She has power in his word. She has it's like faith, and Christ speaks through her mouth. So this is why she's very influenced. Is very influenced, and of course her message, the most important message, is that that people were created to live eternally, and she encouraged them not to waste the opportunity to become saints in this world. But yeah, she has many pertinent messages, and we just love her. Is the most loved person in the Romanian church, and her message and her word is more powerful even than the patriarchs.
So we proceed further with another question. How do Orthodox women and Romanian Orthodox Church relate to feminism?
Well, feminism has many aspects. So in feminism, of course, we might have the idea and desire to be equal to men. And of course, Romanian women will want the same thing, to be equal to men. But when we speak about the Romanian Orthodox Church, they see a complementarity between their role and the clergy role. Now, I already mentioned that Romanians suffered a lot during the history of its church with the Ottomans and with the communists. We have a different history than the Western world. And they could see that priests and the leaders of the church were the first who were victims of different people who wanted to destroy the church. So in a way, they feel, well, we are protected. Also, they see, as all Orthodox women, they see that, you know, each has its gift. Men has their gifts, women have their gifts. Motherhood is a gift that I would say surpasses all the gifts that men can have. And they know that also. They learn also that, you know, Jesus Christ chose only apostles, but they know also that deacons were women also, deacon women. And they want to receive pertinent answers to their questions, because they have questions, contemporary questions that are not answered, unfortunately. The church doesn't address them, I would say, yet, but hope they will do. So they want not necessarily to be priests, but to receive pertinent answers to their questions, and also to be more valorized, their gifts to be valorized in the church. And I can give you another example. For instance, in the church, another reason why many leave the churches is because, and they said, well, I left the church and nobody called me, nobody said a word, didn't write me a message, didn't call me. So I think that women can be there to welcome people and feel in the church like in the family. And if they leave, so to have women to contact them, why do you leave? It's like the mother, or a person in the family, that a woman in a family, when she receives the guests, why do you leave? Okay, so I think there are many, in many ways, woman gifts can be valorized in the church, and hopefully there will come a time when they will be valorized more.
So we have another question, and it is, how quickly did the church in Romania came back after the fall of the Soviet Empire, and how long did it take to educate new priests? Did they study in other countries or they studied in Romania?
So the church existed underground, existed in families. So each family was a small church in Romania. Of course, I speak about the families where faith was important. So Christian families, of course, they were atheist families also. We know that. But Christianity survived in these churches, home churches. Each home was a church. And if it took a lot of time, well, it took a lot of time to reestablish the cursivity in the education, especially in university education. But universities were not closed because were considered academic places. They were not closed, they were not open for women to study theology, but they were open for priests. And in classes, there were discussions that were not controlled by the communists, so they could have nice exchanges. However, I have also to mention that there were some clergy members that unfortunately they divulged the confession, the secret of confession, or they collaborated with Securitatea. Is not something that characterizes Romania and Romanian church, but there were people who didn't have the martyrdom, gift of martyrdom, because not anybody is ready to be a martyr for Christ. Not everybody has this gift. And some, because of being afraid of death or being afraid from the life of people around them, they choose to collaborate with Securitatea. Now, after the fall of communism, not many clergy that collaborated with Securitatea, they came publicly and asked forgiveness from Romanians, and a very moving, humbling act. Of course, I don't know if the members of the family who were affected by their choices forgave them, but was something very, very touching that happened in Romania after the fall of communism. So this is my answer to the question.
Thank you so much. While we're waiting for some more answers, I just wanted to ask you, do you see, can you think of what will happen after the death of Mother Maica Siluana? So who will come to her place? Are they some new generation of nuns who act in similar way or that can be recognized as her successors?
There are many nuns, and in each of these, at least in each of these monasteries that I presented to you today, there are the mother abbot, abbesses they have a powerful power in their word. There are many nuns that have a nice discourse and impact on the faith of Romanians. Of course, Now, nobody compares with Mother Silvana, but she has many disciples. She works with many nuns, and they learn a lot from her. And I'm sure that will be other voices. Always, we always have had nuns' voices, powerful nuns' voices. I would say that Maica Silvana is one of the most now in the contemporary now these days, but we had other nuns very powerful with very powerful message.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, I don't want to take over. I just have maybe just one more question to ask, and then that goes to the role of a woman as pillar of faith that you mentioned. So can you maybe make a comparison, or is there any sources that shows that something similar happened during Ottoman Empire, that women were also kind of pillars in their families and preserving, or it was mainly clergy and churches and monasteries then?
For the Ottoman period, of course, one has to do research. I'm sure that that women have a huge impact in the education and transmission of the Christian faith. I remember now a poem that speaks about a voivode, sort of prince in Romania, who came home. He didn't want to fight with the Ottomans anymore, and his mother didn't receive him. She said, "Go and die for your faith and for your country." So I think that if this exists in poems, that probably existed in reality also. So I didn't make a research to see the influence of women during the Ottoman conqueror and during the Ottoman period that affected so many Eastern European countries. But I could leave the church in family during the communism, because I grew up during the communism. So I know that by experience. Whereas for the Ottoman period, I have to do research to come with something pertinent, with a pertinent message on this.
Thank you, Adriana. So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you and to thank the audience for being part of our event. So we started this morning, and this is our third and last lecture for today. So thank you so much for participating in this. I just wanted to ask Hannah if she would like to add something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I also just wanted to thank you, say thank you to everyone who has listened. And I'm happy that this International Women's Day lectures was so successful. So thank you also to Biana for all the work with the technology. And I hope I meet all of you again, 8th of March, or perhaps earlier. We will do something next year too at International Women's Day. Thank you.